Welcome back, everyone. This is the third lesson. We're learning all about pure bel canto, and David is joining us again. David, in this lesson, we're going to be talking about mental awareness, and
Yes.
this is really important because, and I believe we talked about this maybe even in the intro video.
We did.
But you kind of have to disconnect yourself a little bit from what mainstream media, the radio, the television is telling you of what is good sound, right?
You're listening to it, and it's influencing you, whether consciously or subconsciously. You're being influenced to produce that kind of sound.
Yeah.
I remember when I studied with my teacher, Lyle Moore. Mr. Moore said, "Mr. Moyer, everything you've been singing, everything that you've been listening to up to this point is no longer available to you until I tell you it is. You will listen to the singers I ask you to listen to, and you will disconnect yourself from the contemporary sounds.
Yeah.
Because we need to learn bel canto."
I think that's what happens to so many of us. I know I fell into that category where when I was trying to learn how to sing, I would try to mimic what I thought sounded good,
Okay,
what was
who's one
popular.
of your examples? Who's one of your examples? Can you remember one that you
Oh my
liked?
goodness. Well, I was in musical theater, right?
Right.
So I had a lot of Broadway
Of course.
examples. Bernadette Peters.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Bernadette, nice voice, by the way. She does use some of the bel canto singing sound. I remember seeing Steve Martin and her in a movie, and she sang very, very, very nice on some things.
Right, right. But that's not the standard, especially if we're just talking about radio and things like that's not what you're hearing. So what we're saying in this video, guys, is that you do have to separate yourself from that. It is going to take a mental shift. And kind of like what you were talking about, what your instructor did, you have to disassociate yourself from what they're saying is great and popular and good in order to focus on what is actually better for your voice.
Absolutely. What I'm encouraging you to do is, she just mentioned a good one, Bernadette Peters. Spend some time with listening to her sing some of the prettier sounds. Listen to some of, if you like country, listen to Dolly Parton.
David, I want to talk about your head voice and your chest voice. If anyone's taken any lessons out there, you hear about these two different registers we have. But the story is much bigger than that, right?
Oh, much bigger. In fact, when I learned from Lyle Moore, Mr. Moore, he told me that, yes, there's head voice. Yes, there's chest voice. But he said this way, and he was born about 1899 or 1898, something like that. Anyway, lived to be 100. He said, yes, there are those two registers, but the voice has the ability to mix, and there are adjustments, he called it. Now, over the years, I know that people don't understand adjustments and registers. So the only thing you'd think of a register, you might think of like old cash register. But so I changed it. I figured out it's got to be gears. But unlike a mechanical gear, you can blend as it shifts or adjusts your head voice, which is how we warm a voice. We don't warm it from a chest first. As Mr. Moore used to say, if you do that, you're taking a 2-inch steak and trying to carry it all the way up. It won't shift correctly. That's why we do yawn sigh, like a little higher. We'll go, ooh, and I say sound like a dove, not like a crow, or sound like, or a bulldog, or an elephant. Sound like a dove. Ooh, ooh, or an owl. Ooh. Ooh, that's why I say to do that, because it makes you go into a gear that you've probably never spoken in. Most likely you've never sung in. So the mix of them produces 6 gears. If I demonstrate, and I will. Now remember, my voice is broken, so the third gear, the best of my voice, the one that I would sing most with, is going to be very scratchy and hollow because it's scarred. Okay, well, here's my low voice. That's my low voice. Now I'm going to shift up to my next voice, which is about 5 notes higher, or like do, re, mi, fa, sol. You hear kind of a difference, yet my head stays different, and you'll notice this keeps getting a little higher, and this keeps getting a little more like a trumpet as I do it. Watch. That's the broken part. And now the good gears that are left still. key. Did I learn that in the first year? No. Did I learn it about year 2? Yes. I knew some of it, but I really didn't recognize it till almost 10 years to really get that highest voice.
So is a gear different than an octave?
Yes.
It is. What is the difference between the two?
Gear is an actual physical shift. And it may occur within your octave. And depending on what you sing, because an octave is 8 entire, it's do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, like from The Sound of Music, when Rodgers and Hammerstein taught people to sing the scale, the major scale. That's an octave. Doesn't mean that your voice is going to shift in the same place, because a gear is a physiological shift. And depending on what note you start on, you might start and you could sing 2 notes and your gear shifts. Or you could sing and it might not shift for 5 because you happen to be in the bottom of the gears, like driving a car. You drive first gear. And you know when it goes in the red zone, you better shift to second. And then so forth, all the way up to 6th gear. Well, that takes time to learn that. So no, an octave is not the same as a gear.
Okay.
But the gears might even, depending on what you're at, shift through 2 gears to do the octave jump, depending on the pitch you're on.
Now, using pure Belle Canto, can that impact how many octaves you can sing?
Oh, my.
I'm assuming yes, based on your expression.
In contemporary singing, with the approach they use, most people say, I have a 2.5 octave range. And I go, oh, that's interesting. My singers actually have from 4 to 5 octaves. And they go, that's impossible. And I have to say, with God, all things are possible. But you better understand pure Belle Canto first. There is no way you're singing through 4 octaves if you do not know how to blend your head and your chest in different percentages as it finally becomes pure head or pure chest. Okay? That takes time to understand the sound, knowing what to listen for, knowing how to feel it, making sure the larynx stays low and in place. It should never go in and up. If anything, it goes out and a tiny bit down. In your highest voice, it might go in this much.
Question about, I want to bring in some contemporary artists in here,
Okay,
because
good.
when you talk about octaves, there are certain artists that we think of as being known for singing really, really high. So like Mariah Carey.
Yes.
Is Mariah Carey using pure Belle Canto to reach
She
those
has
notes?
to use some of it, Sonny, to get those high notes.
Okay.
There's no way she could get it any other way. But watch the size of the mouth. What's been twisted in Belle Canto is the cave theory. They've blown the front end, the front of the cave above you, above the entrance and below the entrance, and even on the sides of the entrance off the cave. If you want to see an example of that, watch the video of Robert Goulet singing If Ever I Would Leave You, and then go to the video of If Ever I Would Leave You from Camelot in 1967. Do a comparison of the way the mouth is open for both of those types of productions.
So what you're saying is your mouth does not have to be
No,
super
in fact,
big.
It can't be.
It
If you
can't
do
be.
that, well, think about if you resonate in a cave.
Yeah.
Why do they build an amphitheater around and over your head? So that the sound will bounce off the back of the wall and basically kind of produce a shotgun effect out to the people with more power. It won't just go up in the air and out to the sides. So we have an amphitheater at the Hollywood Bowl. But when you sing, it's not just an amphitheater. To get it to resonate in the amphitheater, the mouth has to be small as a cave. In fact, my teacher used to say, may I borrow your pen? He didn't say, may I borrow your pen? But what he said was, as he would take a pencil or a pen, he'd say, Mr. Moyer, your mouth is too wide. Bite on this pen or pencil. Now sing. Hello. And what it does is it forces the sound to bounce on the front, above and below the cave entrance.
Yeah. And you know what's really interesting about that is so many times when we see singers, contemporary singers, belting what I consider belting it out.
It's belting.
their mouths get really big, and we look at that and we're like, oh, they're trying so hard. We view that with such reverence.
Yes, because they're so emotional.
Right.
Well, you know what? You can. If I was to talk with you, let's take that as an example. They sing like this. If ever I would leave you, it could. Well, would I go to you and talk to you like this? Hi, Sonny. So tell me, how's your day going? How's it going with Sadie, your daughter?
If you did, I would leave.
Right. Something looks wrong with me. Yet they call singing acceptable. Watch the movie Men in Tights, cut to the scene where Robin Hood sings to Maid Marian, and they've got a camera, they've got a wind tunnel on her blowing her hair back and her face going like this as he sings, I love you. They just...
What you're saying, David, is you don't have to do that, though. And if you're singing correctly,
if you're singing correctly, listen to a beautiful production of Una furtiva lagrima, Cesar Valletti, singing in 1949. Look at his mouth and watch his sound. Watch how not his sound, watch how he produces the sound. His mouth at the most. He doesn't do pure Belle Canto because this has been going wrong for almost 200 years, Sonny. Yeah. But he does do at least about, I would say B+, at times, A, Belle Canto.
So let's talk about some homework, guys. And this is going to maybe force some of you guys a little bit out of your comfort zone because we're going to ask you to record yourself. So David, tell us a little bit about the homework.
Okay, first of all, you must recognize that when you record yourself, nothing that you hear in the recording sounds like what's inside your head. And when Mr. Moore first taught that to me, he said, David, what you hear in between your ears will never sound like what is produced. In fact, it will sound so bad until you get used to it. And even then, you still have to spend years getting used to it. It will be like if you knew what your mother put in a recipe, you might just not eat it. That's how bad it sounds. So when you listen to yourself, it's going to be like when Todd listened to himself last week for the first time. I said, Todd, what'd you think? He says, awful. Just awful.
That's the mental.
He says, you have to get used to the sound, and you can't tell when the sound is good until I can get you to the point where I say, okay, that sounds good. That sounds good. And you'll go, no, it doesn't. It sounds terrible. And I'll say, that's the sound. And you'll think, that's the sound? That guy must be crazy. Well, that's what I taught of my teacher. That's why I told that story.
Yeah. So guys, this really is a process. That's why we want you guys to record your voice and start to get used to the sound, the new sound probably for most of you that you're creating. So make sure you do the homework. Now this video was the first of 3 videos. We're talking about the basic facets of good vocal production. We just talked about mental awareness, right? You got to break the mold that you've been in probably your whole life of what sounds good and what sounds bad. And in the next video, we're going to talk about proper posture. So we'll see you in the next video.